Welcome to Living Outside the Matrix, the show where we explode some of the many modern myths within our culture and where we examine important issues that relate to our lifestyle choices, all with the goal that we can thrive and live the best lives that we can live. Hi there, I'm your host Nigel Howitt, and on the show today I'm joined by Greaves, and we're going to discuss the benefits and advantages of living off the land, basically a land-based kind of lifestyle. Alex has worked with the land for many years. He also lives off the land himself, as indeed I do, and he has quite a fair amount of knowledge on permaculture and various other topics that interrelate with this living off the land idea. So Alex, hi to you, and thank you so much for joining us for the show today, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Nigel, and yeah, lots of gratitude for the opportunity to talk about the benefits of this way, because for me it's one of the foundation blocks of a healthy culture.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. It's not a kind of lifestyle that will appeal to absolutely everybody, but I think that there's a lot of people out there that could benefit from hearing from our experience. I'd say there's quite a few health benefits to living off the land. The first one that I'd probably bat out there, it would be the fact that you're mobile, because we both know, don't we, that you're always busy doing something. There's always a task here and a task there to attend to. So, I mean, you know, when you have the old pedometer measuring your paces, you easily clock up more than 10,000 a day. So, yeah, what have you found out?
Oh, for me, we've been gifted this wonderful mechanism of a body, which is absolutely designed to be out and about, and 90% of our history is a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, and we've got 50,000 generations of history to evolve this body to be doing that. So by putting us in an office and sitting sedentary for so long, we're not using our body as it's designed to be used. And we can see from society now, with all the many different disorders, diseases, and
repetitive strain injury, typing.
And it is simply the product of us not using the body in the way it's designed to be used. And so by engaging in a more outdoor lifestyle, growing food, being in the woods, we're starting to use our body to its full capability, which has immense benefits from a health point of view. I mean, for myself, I know I very, very rarely get sick at all. And I just put that down to I spend 90% of my life outside.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that you can do, obviously, when you're living off the land, or when you have access to land, is that you can grow your own food. And I think it's rather sad that in the sort of modern new build house of the kind that you see a lot of here in the UK, gardens seem to be shrinking. So whenever people get these new build houses, you know, we refer to them as postage stamp kind of gardens, and they really don't afford any ability to really do anything meaningful in the garden at all, let alone grow food if you really wanted to do that.
It makes it a lot more challenging with a really small space, and obviously the proximity of so many different people, and quite often shared spaces as well. So that it brings a very difficult, it's not impossible. You know, permaculture will teach you that even if you've got a small space, if you're using the vertical space well, there's ways of getting around it. But certainly the way we're designing our housing is, again, it's completely designed against what our human needs are. We need spaciousness. We need to be able to live in space and to have enough space to grow food. I mean, it's a frustration to me that we have plenty of working models of housing communities that are designed with permaculture. So they're looking at where's all the elements, where's the water, where's the wind coming from, what's the profile of the land, what soil types. And if you look at all of that and design it really well and plant things like food forests and have a growing area, you can provide, I mean, there's a couple of working models in America, it's kind of 60 odd acres, 50 families, and 80% of all of their food is coming from their environment.
Yeah.
And the only maintenance is harvesting.
Yes.
And why we're still building blocky things, I don't know. I don't know why.
So the option that you have with the land-based living off the land, is that you have got that space to grow your own food, haven't you? Which is a massive bonus for the healthy lifestyle.
Absolutely.
You know, organic is obviously quite an important component, and you can do that easily yourself, can't you, when you're growing your own food?
100%. Yeah, I mean, it's really, for me, it's just a great experience to know I've worked this soil. I know exactly what's gone into the soil, how I've worked it. I've planted a tiny seed and I've nurtured it all the way through to harvesting it. So I know 100% all the way back to the seed where my food has come from. Yeah. And, you know, there was studies done into just the nutritional value of carrots before the war, when everything was organic, to now 80% less nutrient dense now. Yeah. And it's just merely for convenience of farmers and how they're farming, and also the way we breed stuff so that it all looks uniform and there's a lot of them, rather than is it really actually good for us? Yeah. And we're looking far more to producing stuff that can go into a supermarket, is easily storable, and all of these things, which again is not looking at what do humans need.
Yeah, totally. And there's a lot of fun growing your own food as well. There's a lot of satisfaction, and in an age where there's, you know, everyone's depressed and there's anxiety and all these sorts of things, I think this is really can be part of the solution. Again, it's not for everybody, but there are so many. It's so enjoyable to do these things yourself and you know, reap a harvest, and it makes you feel good. So there's that factor too. One of the other things that springs to mind for me is a healthy source of water, because if you've got more than just that back garden, you've at least got an option to dig a well or drill a borehole, and therefore access, you know, a healthy source of water. So that's another one that could be overlooked. But also, having looked into the issue of the foundations of health, with gut health being the foundation of health, it's amazing how just getting outside into your environment and pulling weeds and smelling the soil as that you know, the roots come out of the ground, and in animal husbandry as well, you know, keeping chickens and so forth, quite easy to do, even in your back garden actually. Very, very beneficial, even petting your dogs and your cats. The bacterial diversity that we end up exposing ourselves to by living out and about in the environment is hugely superior to that if you just live in a hermetically sealed box. You know, the average house, as Alex was alluding to earlier, here in the UK particularly, you know, people tend not to leave the house. I was talking to a friend just this morning actually, and referring to you know, bad weather kind of days. He says that he just sort of looks out his window up at the garden and sort of, you know, it might be rainy or cold and blustery, and just says, nah, not going out today. And that's it. That's a whole day where you know, somebody could just be inside, you know, watching telly on the computer or whatever.
So if you're spending time outside and you're observing the passing of the seasons, and also if you're tending to fruit trees and just generally food, you start to build these relationships with trees, with the food that you're growing. And any relationship, the more you put in, the more you receive back. And there's a massive movement now in kind of ecotherapy and community gardens cropping up all over in inner cities as well. And people are just drawn to that because it's such a nurturing experience to build the relationships with the group of people that are doing it, but also with the actual plant life.
Yeah, with the actual landscape.
And the landscape is 100%.
Yeah, I remember trees that I planted on our small holding here about 20 years ago. Wow. And you know, you put in a sapling that's probably about, you know, 4 or 5 feet high, and over 20 years you see this full-on tree grow, and you think, wow, you know, I put that there, and it's part of the landscape, and it's quite exciting, isn't it? I mean, okay, we're sort of we're, as I said, it's not actually absolutely for everybody, and there's certainly a place for city life and all that good stuff. But it you know, as you alluded to there's an enormous sense of well-being and connection that you get, isn't there, with your place?
Yeah, for me, and connection for me is the magic word. You know, I work as a nature connection mentor, and the connection is what all human beings crave, be it with other humans, be it with nature. And the more that you can build those connections with all of those things through relationship, which is about putting things in and really not expecting to get much out. But in that, you do receive a huge amount.
Yeah.
And in that, you feel so nourished, so nourished. And as you say, like, growing food is a great way to do it. From simply putting a little bit of effort in, and then you know all of this food is coming and it's super, just full of love, essentially. And that is more nourishing for sure than going to buy a quick salad bag in Tesco's, where you've got no connection to what's happening beyond that salad bag.
Yeah.
And again, it's just building the connections with each other and the landscape and all of our relations that live there.
Yeah.
And that is fundamental.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, one more on the health issue that completes the picture, I think, for a general sense of well-being, is the fact that when we're out on the land, no matter what size area of land you have access to, whether or not it's a small holding, small holdings here in the UK are about the size of a tennis court, roughly. You know, or whether you have a small holding of several acres, it is the fact that you're very likely away from all the electro-smog, the sort of EMF, the Wi-Fi, you know, the intense mobile phone use. And when you walk through a city street, you know, here I live near London, and you know, when you're walking the streets of London, it's really very intense, and it's nice just to get away from all that, especially in the light of the information that's coming out about the harm of these EMF fields. So that's another major benefit that can almost result in a feel-good factor that you can't really put your finger on. You know, it's
100%. I was talking to a fella the other day, and his parents live up in Scotland in a really remote area. And when he goes back there, he says it's the only time that he gets proper sleep, because he lives in a city.
Yeah.
And it's the only time he gets proper sleep. And most people aren't even aware of that difference, because they don't get to spend the time in an open, wild area.
Yeah.
And yeah, again, it's these things that a lot of people aren't even aware of, that actually when they go and have that experience, it's like, wow, this is clean air. And again, that's just that experience for the body is like, this is what it's designed for.
Yeah. It helps develop long-term thinking, really, because I know when you're just planning your vegetable garden, what you might grow, or you're putting trees in, or you're thinking about growing some soft fruit, or even just designing a landscape just for the sheer beauty of it, you know, whether you dig a pond or just planting ornamental shrubs. It's like an artist painting a picture, but you're doing it in 3D, aren't you? You're doing it actually in the landscape, which is, you know, it's that much more exciting. And over the years, when you see things flower and bloom, and you maybe move some things around, it really does give you a massive pleasure rush. I think that most people just maybe haven't even considered that you could get that sort of joy out of being outside.
If it's your land, you're doing the designing. I put with nature, because nature will do a lot of it for you.
Yeah.
And it becomes bespoke to you and your family or your community's needs. And so you look, what are the things that we enjoy to do, and what are the things that we find beautiful? Get a huge list, and then you look at the blank slate of your piece of land and look at what the land is offering you already. And then you can kind of meld the two together in a way that works both for the land and you and your community and your family. So you get this wonderful opportunity to create something that takes a bit of input to start with, but then over the years, as you say, you know, planting a tree and then 20 years later it's huge. But over that period of time, the input that you're putting, it gets less and less and less, but the harvest that you receive from that just goes up and up and up and up and up. And if you time it really right, by the time your retirement, all you do is sit back and harvest, or your kids do that for you. It's great.
Yes.
And what could be more amazing than that? Just creating a landscape that is completely bespoke to you and your needs of you, and also your local community, I'd say, because the more you can bring people in, this is my passion. It's like the more you can open up these doors and allow people to have that experience, the more inspiring it is for them to take those seeds and go and plant them elsewhere. And that way we create these little pockets of people that are nature connected. Yeah. And especially in the times that we're beginning to see happen now, these are the people that are going to be leading the way, I would suggest. Yeah. Richard Louv, who's a very influential nature connection ambassador, he says, the future belongs to the nature savvy.
There's a big connection here with permaculture as well, isn't there? Because you've studied permaculture a lot, and you do permaculture designs, and this is another area of creativity and something that can help the productivity of the land increase, as you mentioned, so that you put in a lot at the beginning and you reap a good reward as the years go on. You're putting in less and less. But something I think is also very beneficial is the knowledge that we gain from just what kind of trees are out and about in our local environment. Because when you live on a housing estate, there may well be just a few ornamentals planted here and there, but I think particularly this is particularly relevant for the next generation, and our children are all home educated. But my son has a quite a good knowledge of the variety of tree in his environment, the variety of wildlife, of frogs and toads and snakes and all of these things. You sort of build a knowledge base of your immediate environment, which again is part of that connection, isn't it? Sort of, you think, yeah, I kind of know my place. For example, you know that there aren't any, nasty spiders that can hurt you. I mean, we're fortunate in the UK in that respect. But just knowing what's out there, I think, can serve that connection aspect, can't it?
To have that kind of broad knowledge, there's a couple of things. Sense of place, so you really feel at home where you are because you know these trees, you know the shrubs, you know the animals that dwell within them. But there's something else happening, especially for kids, and this is what I'll go back to indigenous cultures. The first thing they do as parents is hand over your kid to the grandparent, and then the grandparent will send them on errands out into the wild. Can you collect this berry, go and harvest this? And essentially is under the radar, just connecting them to the landscape.
Right.
And if you take kind of, my mentor does a lot of work with the Kalahari Bushmen, and their kids know more than the scientists that are studying the landscape in flora fauna, because they're so connected. They know everything and how it relates to each other.
And they've probably got more information actually about the practical uses. I mean, the person that's studying it can sort of catalogue stuff, but in terms of knowledge of, well, what's that plant good for? Because it ties into natural medicines and things, doesn't it? That can be found in a lot of hedgerow plants.
From a health point of view, I don't use any traditional meds because I know that I can walk usually to a hedgerow, as you say, and I can get something that's natural that has no side effects and only benefits, and use that as my medicine.
Yeah.
And the more that we regain that old knowledge, which we had and then have lost it, but the more we regain that kind of information, the more we won't be reliant upon that, and the more that will fade away, and then we will be far healthier and more in contact with what's really here and actually there to help us.
Yeah, there's two big categories, I think, of the benefits of living off the land for me, which are sort of the spiritual values, if you like, and the practical values. And when I say spiritual values, I mean values pertaining to my consciousness, to things like, as you mentioned, sense of place, sense of purpose, a meaning to life. When you're bound to the seasons and you have an ongoing project, it gives you, that long-term vision I mentioned earlier, and seeing your life as that whole sum of years, and it really it gives you a sense of self-esteem in that you're planning. You have to be practical, so you have to learn lots of different skills. That self-determination that you enjoy, that sort of being master of your own destiny, captain of your own ship. And I manage a small holding, and you do something similar as well. Maybe you can share something about that. But the whole project, the fact that it's an ongoing project, just gives me a sense of having some control over my life that I didn't have when I was a PAYE, living a different that's pay as you earn for those who don't know, a whole different lifestyle of going to work and coming back and just maybe going outside or going for a walk in the woods or a cycle ride at weekends. So a whole area of enjoying that sense of self-determination. Would you agree with that?
100%, yeah. And I like what you say, kind of having that the long-term vision. So something that you're heading toward, your North Star is what I would call it. So you've got your North Star, and the problem with a lot of people's lifestyles is, especially with the home environment, there's no room for kind of evolution. I've got this box, I've got this postage stamp, and where's that really headed? Whereas if you've got a piece of land, you can really work with that and evolve it as you move along, and as you kind of master of your own ship. I quite like working with nature within that. So there's variables which are going to limit what you want to achieve on a piece of land. In doing that, you enable yourself to feel like you're heading somewhere. Whereas a lot of people feel stuck and kind of trapped in their lifestyle, because I've just got this job and I just keep doing the same thing every day, and I come back and my house is the same and the postage stamp isn't really going anywhere. And that has that feeling of entrapment for me. I know that. Whereas if you're managing your own piece of land and you go, okay, well, this is kind of how I would like it to be, and then you notice what nature's doing anywhere. The jays will plant acorns somewhere and you go, oh, there's an oak tree here, that's good. I'll nurture that oak tree. And so there's the stuff that you plan, and there's the stuff that you're gifted with nature as well. And it's important for me, it's important to pay attention to what's happening.
Yeah, I found at least half of the trees on my small holding have been planted not by me.
100%. And it's kind of noticing something and rolling with it. So there's this, as you say, there's the element that you can have more control in where you're headed, but also within that there's infinite variation that will happen, and then you just kind of have to change your vision a little bit to roll with what is. We need stability, we need control, but we also need spontaneity and the ability just to be a bit more free.
Yeah, and there's room for all of that when you're on, living off the land, when you're in charge of your own piece of turf. One thing I like about it is that there's always room for a new idea, isn't there? There's always room for, I mean, I have not a big piece of land, it's only 3 acres, and we have wild areas and we have wooded areas, and there's always some little nook where you can sort of develop a new project. We started growing some willow in one corner a couple of years ago, which was quite good fun, and a key to the financial bow as well, to sell the willow, and as well as the sort of animal management. There's always something new that you can do. So that gives you, and you have that sense of freedom to do it. You don't have to ask. You don't have to ask if can I put in this soft fruit section somewhere. You can do these things, and it gives you a sense of freedom, doesn't it? I mean, albeit a microcosm of freedom, because as soon as you go back out onto the street, you're back into the what I refer to as the matrix. But yeah, sense of freedom is important, isn't it?
Oh, hugely important, I think. And for me, looking at modern society, modern life, that's one of the key pieces, because, as I say, people feel trapped by their situation, by their housing, by the job, that it's not something that's nourishing them, it's just something that I have to do in order to pay the bill. And the more we can kind of free ourselves from that mentality, the more you go, what is it that I'm really called to do? And as you say, not everyone wants to be completely land-based, but then from a cultural point of view, we've lost the village.
Yeah.
And like, we home educate and we talk about this a lot. The village, it takes a village to raise a kid, and we've kind of lost that. And it's how can we rebuild that within where we are at the moment in a way that nourishes us. And if it's, I'm going to go and volunteer at this community garden or a community space where they're having open days, and you can go and start to get a feel for what it is like to build a relationship with growing your own food or planting trees or anything like that. Those are the opportunities which are going to start to open doorways to something different en masse.
Yeah.
And I said, like, I look to Indigenous culture a lot, because they have really happy, healthy, vibrant people that are fully present and fully alive to each moment. And the reason for that, as far as I can see it, and there's been a lot of work, my mentor John Young's done a lot of good work from the 8 Shields organisation, worth checking out if you haven't already.
It's great for children as well. I mean, I know from my children, running around, I dug a pond here on my small holding, and I always intended it to be a swimming pond, and it gives me so much pleasure to see my children, aged 10, 8 and 6, jumping into and splashing around in this what looks like muddy water by the time they haven't been in it long and they've churned up all the clay, but they love it, and it's wonderful. They don't sort of the whole thing, whether it's swimming in the pond, whether it's running through the woods, the fresh air, the exercise, as you say, the sense of connection. It's something that is wonderful to offer children, and it happens to dovetail quite nicely with home education. But even if your kids are in school, the getting them out and about, running around on a piece of land or even an allotment, it offers them so much, doesn't it?
Unbelievable, an unbelievable amount of learning. I think nature is our greatest teacher, and I run Nature Connection school for kids, and we have a schedule of what we're going to do, mostly so we can show people and go, we know what we're doing. Yes. But actually what we're doing is putting kids in nature and then just responding to what they're responding to in the moment. So if they're really interested about something, and you kind of see, and then you just follow that thread, and you can have a whole session based off of someone just noticing that there's a lizard. And then by the end of the session, they know all sorts about lizards. You've got people that would never look at a book, looking in a book to try and find out a little bit of information. Where is it going to live? Where am I going to next find it? And it just all happens naturally. Yeah. And that's why nature is such a gift to us.
It's kind of that interconnectedness of a syllabus, isn't it? Because, again, homeschooling, mainstream schooling is a whole other topic. But it emphasises the point, when you're living off the land, it emphasises the point that life's integrated and everything affects everything else. And as you say, one subject just freely flows into another, doesn't it?
100%. And also, just about growing your own food with kids, everyone struggles to get their kids to eat vegetables. Mm-hmm. The only time our kids will willingly eat a vegetable with no complaint is when we've grown it ourselves, because they've been involved in that process. So River, when we did potatoes, harvesting potatoes was just like finding gold for him. Just like, wow, it's another potato, it's amazing, another potato. Yeah. But it's amazing.
Food coming out of the ground, 100%. Instead of out of the shops.
Yes, exactly. This is where it really comes from. Here's a carrot. Yeah. And we have a charity that comes into where I live, and they have kids with challenging behaviours. But one of them came into the garden. He was looking for wild garlic because he was doing cooking. He really loves cooking. So I showed him where the wild garlic was. And then I just took him around the garden, showing him all the different herbs and stuff. And it blew his mind. It's like, wow, there's so much, like fennel and aniseed, and he was tasting it all. And it just blew his mind. And he's so passionate now about getting involved with the garden. And it just takes those just tiny moments of just having the experience of something different. And I go back to what I said at the beginning. It's an inbuilt thing that we have from these generations of being connected to the land. And there's an inner joy that is just waiting to be expressed. So I can recommend getting your kids involved with any growing that you do, especially vegetables.
Yeah, and one thing that sort of, speaking of children, this is the idea of when we're living off the land, when you have your own space, that the fact that you can enjoy peace and quiet occasionally. I mean, you can literally getting away from all of that hubbub, that's town life, that that intense Wi-Fi, the whole thing. I mean, it's funny, talking about the children. It's like, can you ever have peace when you've got children? But you can, and having your own place that's out in nature is a great way of recharging your batteries and being still. When you choose to, you have to schedule it in, don't you, like everything. But I think it affords a great opportunity for downtime as well as active time.
100%. I mean, one of the main kind of core routines, as we call them, of Nature Connection is called a sit spot, and essentially just find a spot in nature and visit it as regularly as you can, and just spend, as long as you can there, just being. And it's just like paying attention to the sounds around you, really being observant about what you're seeing, feeling the wind against your skin, just to enliven all these senses that we've dulled over a period of time where we just haven't used them as well as we can. You're still, you're really tuning into your senses so they're fully alert, and in doing that you change the brain waves in your brain, and it's like super meditation, and it's so simple. And the benefits are endless, because it puts you, especially if you do it first thing in the morning, it puts you in a fully connected state. So you're really connected into yourself and the web of life, as I would put it, which just means that you're more able to respond to a situation in a beneficial way.
And it kind of ties in with the permaculture, in that, you know, one of the things about permaculture is you just observe the land for a while, don't you? You don't. Our modern culture is very much sort of steam in there with the bulldozers, and we'll have that over there and this over here. But the permaculture approach is to just observe for at least a season. See what happens, see what comes up, and I suppose that's pretty much ties in with that, doesn't it?
100%, because if you're really paying attention to, you know, buy a piece of land and then don't do anything for a year, they say, just watch everything, just watch where the sun's moving, where's the water, when it rains hard, where's the runoff, where's the wind coming, all of these things that if you really pay attention to, you can then work with them.
Yeah.
And our tendency, as you say, in our culture is, where's a bit of land, bulldoze it. And so you're working against all of nature. And I think we can really establish that nature's has a bit more sway than us tiny humans.
And it has a lot to offer, doesn't it? If we don't move in there and push it all out the way first. It's like sort of listening before you speak, isn't it? It's sort of analogous to that. Yeah, so we got a lot of consciousness needs fulfilled by them living off the land, but I think there's also another key factor is many practical benefits, and there are loads of practical benefits. You know, the top of the list that springs to mind is that when you're managing a piece of land, even if it's just a large garden, you necessarily have to learn a lot of skills, don't you? You know, you necessarily have to get your practical head on and think things through, make plans, think long term. But you know, even putting up sheds here, building compost loos there, even if it's just constructing a frame for plants to grow up, or there's numerous reasons, you know, raising barns across the whole spectrum of buildings that you need. And there are all sorts of things that need creating, putting up fences, and you have to get practical. And I think that's quite useful. I mean, we all know how big the DIY industry is, but there's a lot of benefit in the have-to-ness of running a piece of land. It sort of gets you straight in there. You can't really afford to say, oh, well, I can't do that. You know, it's like, you know, a pipe's burst, let's get a plumber in. No, you know, I mean, we have a borehole here, but if there's a problem with the water, I don't ring a plumber. I have to sort of, you know, dig up the pipe work and fix it myself. And I think that again develops something of a can-do attitude, doesn't it? In terms of a practical benefit.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's really nourishing again to yourself, because it's like, I don't have this skill, and we live in an amazing age where you can, on a phone even, how do you do this? And you'll get umpteen videos showing you how to do that. And so it's not like it's not achievable. But then you have that skill yourself. You can take that forward, you can share it with others. And yeah, it's a massive benefit.
I mean, again, one of the practical benefits I see is the fact that you have to take responsibility. You know, as soon as you've got your piece of land, whatever you're going to do with it, nothing's going to happen unless you actually make it happen. So you're necessarily kicked into a situation where you develop your own capacity to take responsibility for your whole life, really, because these things spread. You know, if you're taking responsibility for managing a piece of land, it inevitably spills over into your life. I would contend. Maybe not everyone would agree with me on that, but yeah, you're going to say something to that?
No, I was just going to recount the story when I first had to build my yurt platform, and like that's not my skill base. I'm about nature and green stuff and growing stuff. And I was just like, oh no.
I don't want to do
oh no, I'm gonna have to do this. But you know, a bit of planning, bit of forward, checking out a few videos, and then it happened, and I did it, and it was so satisfying to me. It's like, I've built the foundations literally for my house. I did that, and what a great sense of satisfaction that was for me. Yeah. And now I've done another one. It's great. It was much easier and less stressful.
Yeah. And look at that sense of self-esteem, that sense of can-do, self-efficacy that you build from that. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I think another one of the big practical values is the fact that you, or this is what I found, is that you sort of get a sense of taking your place in the community as a somebody managing a bit of land, as a landowner, or even as a tenant. You get that sense of interaction with the local community. As soon as you're producing something, which of course you've got the opportunity to, I mean, that's another practical value, is that you have the opportunity to produce something, whether or not it's you know, coppicing hazel or making fence panels, or you know, there's a whole variety of things that you can grow and produce. If you've got trees, you can make all sorts of rustic furniture. But when you bring your produce to market, you're kind of, it gives you a sense of feeling on the map, doesn't it, within that community that you're dealing with, and a sense of place, sense of pride in producing. Again, we're tipping over into the spiritual values, but there's a lot of benefit from that, isn't there?
Oh, hugely so.
I was talking to a chap the other day who was discussing aquaculture and combining a pond with fish with a polytunnel, and you know, these amazingly creative ideas of using basically the fish poo to feed the plants, and the plants to filter the water back to the fish. You know, the creative possibilities are really only limited by the imagination. And the other thing it ties in with is the ability to be entrepreneurial, because really, when you're living in your two up, two down, which is sort of like a street full of houses, for those of you that aren't familiar with that term, or if you're on a housing estate where you're living on top of a lot of people, you simply haven't got the access to the space that's required for developing any sort of entrepreneurial ideas. And this, I think, is a major practical value and advantage in having a piece of land. Your options are suddenly opened up, aren't they, with the things that you can do and interacting with the community. So everything interrelates, doesn't it?
100%, and there's the interconnectedness of that, which is really where we're headed to at the moment. I think we've realised that we've been so disconnected from the land and from each other, and because of that disconnect, decisions are being made for us that are heading in a certain direction. And now if we can start to bring that back a little bit, go, okay, let's actually connect. Let's connect with the ground and what that requires, and how can we work with that in a beneficial way, so we're not essentially poisoning ourselves and the planet in general. And if we start to do that more, it only builds this huge momentum and has huge benefits. And I see the ripples just from our little community garden that go out. So the people that come in and just have that experience of like, this is just really beautiful, and also you're getting food and fruit, veg, all of this from this space. And then they go out and then they're inspired a little bit to do that just on a small scale.
Yep.
And again, that then plants a seed in their community, and that starts to grow, and then you start building connections, and yes, hugely beneficial.
Yep. Another one of the things I think that living off the land affords us is an opportunity to sort of design your lifestyle, because if we're living the 9 to 5, if we're in that on that treadmill of getting up out of a box, getting into a transport box, going to the work box, and then doing the reverse, back into the transport box, back into the home box, it's difficult to really rethink your life. But a land-based way of living, or living off the land, really gives you an opportunity to redesign your life. For one thing, that your whole schedule becomes your own, doesn't it? It ties in with taking responsibility, because you've got to make sure you do everything, but you do have the ability to really write your own schedule. You can map your own week out, and yes, there's work to be done, and some of it's hard work. It's not all a bed of roses. But the fact that you can plan your own time and design in many other factors of your life. I mean, I like to get up in the morning and do some yoga and so forth, and then at a certain time in the afternoon I might want to go and do something else, and I can do these things. I can stop and go and do some writing between 3 and 4, which you can't necessarily do if you're in that mainstream lifestyle on the treadmill.
The treadmill is a tricky one to escape, I think, because we all, it's so fast paced that anything else becomes difficult to achieve. And that's why a sit spot is a really helpful technique. Just actually commit that time just to slow down. But yeah, just again, it's that everything's bespoke to you, because we all have our own natural rhythms. Some people are early birds, some people are night owls, and you can work within that and create your own schedule that works for you. I know I'm going to be more creative actually when I'm more tired.
Yeah.
So if I need to do something creative, I'll do that at a point when I'm tired in the day, and when I'm up and full of energy, that's where I'll be digging fence posts, because it needs all of my energy to do that.
Yeah. So I mean, all in all, I think that living off the land is a huge sort of personal development opportunity, you could say, in that all these things we talked about, such as taking responsibility, the ability to design your lifestyle, learning all these other skills. It's a discipline, isn't it? Because if you're looking after animals, you have the commitment and that you have to be able to attend to the things that you started. I know your beautiful mandala garden that you're creating. It's not the sort of thing that you can walk away from for a season, is it? No. So some people might see that as a drag. The commitment, but I would suggest that it's a huge bonus when we factor in all those other spiritual advantages that we've talked about, the feel-good factors, and the good thing about things like that you're growing is, of course, you can go on holiday for a couple of weeks. If you've got pigs, chickens, and geese like we have, and a dog, it's not quite so easy. So there is that element of commitment that can literally tie you to the land. But I think as the more the community grows, and we've helped each other out in that respect as well, you can sort of land sit for each other.
Well, definitely, and I see just more and more people get interested in land-based living and start to volunteer in different places and just dip their toes in where they can in order to have the experience. The more that we'll have more people that are looking to do this kind of thing. I mean, I was looking on the council website for planning permission reasons, and they have now got a section that says self-build. We expect this to be more and more popular because it is in Europe, and so now it's even being recognised by the council that there are groups of people that want to come together, build their own house and manage a piece of land in a way that works for them and the land as well. And so there's a big movement, and great. Yeah, because that's what
I mean, that kind of ties in. Maybe we should move it on to the achievability of this, because here we are sort of waxing lyrical about the benefits of living off the land, but to a lot of you out there, it may seem a bit pie in the sky. It may seem unobtainable, and this leads us on to the question of how can you achieve it. There are other parts of the world where buying land is considerably easier than it is here in the UK. In the UK, it's quite difficult, but there are always farmers' fields going for sale, aren't they, in various areas. Building plots with dwelling permission in this country, come at too high a premium, I think, to be considered. There are areas of woodland that often come up for sale, and I always think that buying woodland is a great thing to do because you necessarily get a standing crop. It's like buying a farmer's field with a ready crop of something ready to harvest, because obviously you always need trees to, for structures and stuff, and you can immediately replant them. So it is a bit of a challenge starting off, but it's still worth having the idea of owning a piece of land as an ultimate goal, even if you only aspire to it, and sow the seeds of a plan and maybe work towards it, because it is achievable. And land prices in the UK, I know they vary around the world, and it's much easier to do in places like the States and in Canada. Land prices around here can be as much as sort of £8,000 to £10,000 an acre if you're anywhere where somebody can get horses in, but it can be cheaper depending on where you are.
It's tricky with the planning laws as they are at the moment, but I'm ever optimistic that with the growing groundswell of people looking for this kind of lifestyle, there will have to be a shift in some way to enable that to happen. But there's more and more communities that are starting to grow, which are completely land-based and kind of driven by permaculture and self-sustainability.
Lammas is one that springs to mind in Wales, and amongst others.
Land Matters down in Devon, that's a good one. And even communities like Schumacher College, Embercombe, they're all very much kind of land-based, but with college attachments to it in Schumacher's case. But I think a really great way for anyone who's kind of looking and being interested is to go to these kind of places, take a look around. They always do open days, connect with the people, find out their story. How did you achieve this? And then doors will start to open. Yeah. That's what kind of we found. I mean, we're incredibly blessed in our situation. And that was merely from just taking the plunge and just going, this is what we want. And it's going to be really difficult for a while, but we're going to make that step. And as soon as we did that, all these doors opened, and suddenly we were really supported, and we found a community that kind of built around us, supporting what we do.
Yes.
And it's difficult to take that first step. But I think to kind of wind your way into that kind of world, just start connecting with the people. And as you say, farmland is available. Yeah. And will be more and more available, I'd suggest, because mainstream agriculture is not sustainable in the way it's done now at all. And so there's going to be more and more farmers looking, because they, by the nature of the job, they're not making money. They love the land, they love the animals. They're going to be looking for people that are going to take care of their land and turn it into something that is worthwhile, rather than them not making any money and struggling. Why not? Here's a group of people, they really want to make a sustainable land-based community. Great.
One solution that could work is to team together with a bunch of other like-minded people. And I mean, I'm an advocate of private land ownership. I think that's a good goal to aim for. But you can team together with a bunch of people and buy a larger piece of land and then work out how to divide it afterwards. One of the factors, again, in this country specifically, is that you might have a 40-acre field or something going for £100,000, which may be beyond the reach of the average person. But if we think creatively and maybe sort of team up with other groups of like-minded people, there's definitely the opportunity to maybe break up a larger purchase, a larger parcel of land. So don't be put off. I think that the opportunity for freedom and freedom of expression, for healthy lifestyle design, for getting out there and just designing a whole new way of life, which I think we both agree is urgently required. Getting onto the land, and even if you can't live on it, my local council here in England don't allow me to live on my piece of land, which is a shame. Maybe that'll change, but for those people that want to be free and to be free to act upon their own judgment, it's a great exercise, living off the land in terms of what you can produce and what you can create from it. It's really is a huge bonus. So I do hope that this is inspiring maybe some of you listeners to at least aspire to this over a period of years, because it's not the sort of thing that you can jump into. I mean, you mentioned that you sort of planned it over a period of time. Yeah. And I think it's something where you have to sort of sow a seed and an idea, try to get an impression that it is possible, and again steer that long-term plan. And it can be made to happen, and the rewards, I would say, and I think you'd agree, are enormous. The feel-good factor and all of those other things we've talked about really do make it worthwhile, don't they?
100%, yeah. And as I say, my suggestion for everyone is just start to go and make connections with a community garden or any community projects that are involved in that way, because you'll get a sense and have the experience of what it's like to be working the land in different ways. And
that woofing project, that's another one, isn't it?
Yeah, woofing's good. So there's lots of permaculture farms around the world, and you can go and just volunteer, and they welcome you and they'll feed you in exchange for you working, which is great. You get the experience and the skills.
Woofing being working on organic farms. No, is it worldwide working on organic farms, something like that. Anyhow, woof.
Yeah, just go woof. That's a really great thing, and you can. I mean, if you have that kind of life, you can go and travel the world doing that, and you'll come back.
Which doesn't even require land ownership, does it? It requires getting inspired, which you could then find a part of the world where you do want to settle down and put all that acquired knowledge into practice, couldn't you?
Yeah. And the other thing I'd say, horticultural endeavour is not rocket science. It's really achievable. I mean, there's certain things that you can learn and develop your skill set, but actually I've seen people with no skill that just have a real passion for growing vegetables, grow the best vegetables ever. And I've seen people that have no passion for it and all the knowledge and skills grow rubbish stuff. And so I just say, if you feel inspired and you want to do it, it will work out for you. And if you'll develop the skills over time, and it's not rocket science, it's really super easy, realistically. There's a few basic principles, and once you've got those, the world is your oyster. As you say, like designing a piece of land, there's infinite possibility, only limited by your own imagination and kind of the land that you have with you. It's just, it's an amazing opportunity.
Absolutely. I mean, by in some sort of way of summary, the benefits are huge. There are very practical benefits. It's extremely healthy to get out on the land. There's so many feel-good factor spiritual values. There's so many practical values that open up economically, and the gaining knowledge, the sense of self-esteem. There's the personal development aspect. There's the sense of community. It really, the list is long, and as two people that do live off the land, I mean, I for one certainly really recommend anyone who has even a glimmer of interest that it's achievable as well. That's the thing. Here in England, it is difficult. There's no doubt about that. But I think it's probably a lot easier in other parts of the world. So hopefully this has served to inspire in some shape or form. Well, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much, Alex Greaves, for coming along. And do you have a website or anything that you'd like to share, a contact point? Because you're teaching of your nature connection stuff. Is there something?
Yeah, if anyone's interested in kind of the nature connection principles, we've got a Facebook page, and you can Google us. We've got a website almost ready, but we're called Wild Roots Nature Connection Community. So if you Google that, you'll find us.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for listening, and I do urge you to visit the website, lawfulrebel.com. Loads more on there about how to bust out of the matrix, as I call it, how to find out information that's not in the mainstream or that is counter to the mainstream, because the mainstream message is often 100% wrong. And often a lot of important topics are simply ignored. So there's some great stuff on the website to help you thrive and really flourish, as opposed to just get by while you run on the old hamster wheel. So once again, thank you very much for listening, and I do hope you'll join me again for another episode of Living Outside the Matrix.
Be the change you want to see. Be the change you want to see. Be the change you want to see. Be the change you want to see.